Every single person who has ever lived will face the same inevitable truth that terrified Lord Voldemort more than anything else. Death isn't just the end of a story. It's the driving force behind one of literature's most complex villains. While most people see Voldemort as pure evil, there's something much deeper happening. His entire existence revolves around a fear so universal that it reveals uncomfortable truths about human nature itself. Tom Riddle's journey into darkness didn't start with a thirst for power. It started with a simple question that most 11-year-olds never think to ask. When Dumbledore first met him at the orphanage, Tom's first concern wasn't about magic or Hogwarts. He wanted to know if his father was a wizard, because if he wasn't, that meant his father was just another mortal who died. This obsession with death shaped every choice Tom made from that moment forward. The philosophers call this death anxiety, the deep, primal fear that drives human behaviour in ways we rarely recognise. Ernest Becker won a Pulitzer Prize explaining how this fear motivates almost everything we do. We build monuments, create art, have children, seek fame, all desperate attempts to achieve some form of immortality. But Tom Riddle took this universal human drive and pushed it to its absolute extreme. Most people deal with death anxiety by finding meaning in their temporary existence. They build relationships, create legacies, find purposes bigger than themselves. Tom chose a different path. He decided that death itself was the enemy, and he would defeat it no matter the cost. This wasn't just evil. This was a philosophical position that millions of people throughout history have secretly wished they could take. Here's where things get disturbing. Voldemort's method for achieving immortality, the Horcrux, requires splitting your soul through murder. But this isn't just random dark magic. It's actually a twisted reflection of how humans naturally cope with death anxiety. Psychologists have identified something called symbolic immortality, the ways people try to live forever through their impact on others. Normal people achieve this through love, mentorship, or creating something meaningful. They become immortal by being remembered positively. Voldemort chose the opposite path. He decided that if he couldn't be loved forever, he would be feared forever. Each Horcrux wasn't just a piece of his soul. It was a guarantee that his impact on the world would never fade. Think about it. Every wizard in Britain knows the name Voldemort decades after his supposed first death. Parents still whisper, "You know who," to their children. He achieved exactly what he wanted, a form of immortality through fear. But here's the catch that Tom Riddle never understood. This kind of immortality comes at the cost of everything that makes life worth living. The more Horcruxes he created, the less human he became. His appearance changed, his ability to feel diminished, his connections to others vanished completely. He was so afraid of death that he chose something arguably worse, a life completely empty of meaning, connection, or joy. But Voldemort's story reveals something even more unsettling about human nature. His greatest fear wasn't actually death itself. It was insignificance. Watch how he behaves throughout the series. He doesn't just want to live forever. He wants to be the most important person who ever lived forever. This connects to what philosophers call the denial of death. The idea that humans create elaborate belief systems and power structures to avoid confronting their mortality. Voldemort built an entire ideology around blood purity, not because he genuinely cared about wizard genetics, but because he needed to believe he was fundamentally different from everyone else. If pureblood wizards are superior, and he's the most powerful wizard ever, then maybe the rules that apply to everyone else don't apply to him. Maybe death, which comes for all ordinary people, will make an exception for someone truly extraordinary. This is why he obsesses over being special, over having unique powers, over his ancestry connecting to Salazar Slytherin. The tragic irony, by trying so hard to prove he was above human limitations, Voldemort became the most human character in the entire series. His actions are driven entirely by the same fear that keeps ordinary people awake at 3 a.m, wondering what happens when everything just ends. Now here's where Voldemort's philosophy completely falls apart, and where J.K. Rowling accidentally created one of the most powerful arguments against the fear of death in modern literature. Throughout the series, we see characters who face death with courage, and every single one of them has something Voldemort lacks: acceptance of their own mortality. Harry's parents died protecting him. Sirius died fighting for what he believed in. Dumbledore spent an entire year preparing for his own death. Even Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest knowing he's about to die. What do all these characters have in common? They found something more important than their own survival. This is what philosophers call authentic existence, living in a way that acknowledges death, while refusing to be controlled by the fear of it. These characters achieved something Voldemort never could. They made their temporary lives meaningful, precisely because they knew those lives would end. But here's the really mind-bending part. Voldemort's inability to understand love isn't separate from his fear of death. It's the same problem. Love requires vulnerability. It means accepting that you care about someone you might lose. It means opening yourself up to grief, to loss, to the pain of mortality. Voldemort chose immortality specifically to avoid that pain, but in doing so, he cut himself off from the only thing that makes life worth living. This is why Voldemort's final defeat is so philosophically satisfying. He doesn't just lose because Harry has plot armor, or because love conquers all. He loses because his entire worldview is fundamentally flawed. When Harry offers him one last chance to feel remorse, to try to put his soul back together, Voldemort can't even understand what that means. Remorse requires accepting that you were wrong, that you hurt people, that your actions had consequences you can't control. It requires admitting that you're not the center of the universe, that other people's lives matter as much as yours. For someone whose entire identity is built on being above human limitations, remorse is literally impossible. But here's what makes this even more tragic. The process of creating Horcruxes doesn't just split your soul. It traps you in a psychological prison. Each murder, each Horcrux, makes it harder to connect with others, harder to feel empathy, harder to find meaning in anything except your own survival. Voldemort didn't just choose immortality. He chose a form of existence that made immortality the only thing he could want. Think about the older Tom Riddle we see in the memories. He was charming, intelligent, capable of forming relationships. The Horcruxes didn't just preserve his life. They destroyed everything that made that life worth preserving. He became immortal at the exact cost of his humanity. So what does Voldemort actually teach us about the fear of death? Everything. He shows us what happens when that fear becomes the only thing driving your decisions. He demonstrates how the desperate attempt to avoid mortality can rob life of all meaning. Most importantly, he proves that death isn't the enemy. Meaninglessness is. The real tragedy of Tom Riddle isn't that he died. It's that he spent 70 years alive without ever truly living. He had access to magic, knowledge, power and connection, but he threw it all away, chasing an immortality that turned out to be indistinguishable from death itself. Every person watching this video will face the same choice Tom Riddle faced. You can spend your limited time trying to escape the inevitable, or you can accept mortality and use that acceptance to find meaning. You can build Horcruxes, metaphorical ones like fame, wealth, or legacy, or you can build relationships, experiences, and purposes that make your temporary existence worthwhile. The next time you feel that anxiety about your own mortality creeping in, remember this: Voldemort got everything he thought he wanted. and ended up with nothing. Meanwhile, Harry's parents, who died at 21, achieved something the Dark Lord never could. They found something worth dying for, which meant they found something worth living for. In the end, that might be the only difference that truly matters.